Hello, this is Chris Goldthorpe with ChrisChess.com. Please do like, subscribe, and share. This video is going to be about Dr. Max Euwe and the next step in the World Championship cycle. Some of my earlier videos on this subject uh, involved the world champions in order: Steinitz, Lasker, and Capablanca and Alekhine. So details about their lives and games were included in those videos. We'll talk about Alexander Alekhine and Dr. Max Euwe again briefly, because those were the two in the match that left Dr. Max Euwe the new world champion in December of 1935. So let's first get a little bit of perspective of what happened in 1935 in general. I know my mom wasn't even born then. How about yours? Maybe your grandparents were born before 1935, maybe not. Just in general history, 1935, we have Austria has the world's first day of a postage stamp, or the world's first day of postage stamp. December 4th, 1200, St. Joseph's College enroll in an anti-communism class. December 1st, the first commercial hydroponics operation was established in California. December 5th, the National Council of Negro Women's forms by Mary McLeod Bethune in New York City. December 8th, the Japanese military police launches a violent suppression of the religious sect Omoto, which I believe was Japanese, beginning with a crackdown on the sect's operational bases of Ayebe and Kumamoto in Kyoto Prefecture, and the arrest of its leader, Anisburo Deguchi. Doesn't sound like a very Japanese name. December 9th, Walter Liggett, American newspaper editor and muckraker, was killed in a gangland murder. Let's see, what other events on that day? The Battle of this place ends? Never heard of it. Charles the Great crowns Louis the Emperor. By the way, this page is on onthisday.com. The Roman Catholic practice of public adoration of the Blessed Sacrament outside of Mass spreads from monasteries to prejudices. Oh, that's on this day in 1226? Nah, we're not too concerned with that. Just 1935. So let's see, what did the New York Times have going in 1935? Black Sunday Dust Bowl. This one's too small to read. And again, this is one of those websites where you just look up this stuff. There's some other noteworthy general historical facts of 1935. Italy invaded Ethiopia. The German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, is created. Germany introduces conscription to international condemnation. Britain announces plans to triple the size of its air force. Britain, France, and Italy form a united front against Germany rearmament, and the war between Bolivia and Paraguay ends. Radar is developed in Britain by Robert Watson Watt and A.F. Wilkins, following from an observation that passing aircraft distort radio reception. In Utah, Malcolm Campbell sets a new land speed record of 301.3 miles per hour, which is 485.2 kilometers per hour. An artificial material later named nylon is invented. It's the first of a new type of material, polymers, which consist of long chains of repeating units of relatively simple chemical composition. So we're probably more interested in what happened in the chess world then in 1935. Um, I'm going to save the best for last. Sam Reshevsky wins the Margate tournament with 7.5 out of 9, ahead of Capablanca, who had 7. Ruben Fine wins the Hastings tournament with 7.5 out of 9, ahead of Salo Floor, who had 6.5. Laszlo Szabo wins the Hungarian championship for the first time. And Aaron Nimzovich, born 1886, dies of pneumonia. He's the guy who wrote My System. Bent Larson was born. Fritz Bombach is born. And Gregory Sanikoev, winner of the World Correspondence World's Championship in 1984 to 91, is born in 1935. So, most of you listening already know a bit about Alekhine and Dr. Max Euwe. By the way, that's how his name is pronounced, Euwe. So let's take a look at Alekhine first. He's the guy on the way out here. He was a Russian, then he went to France, and he was the 4th official world chess champion. Widely considered to be one of the greatest players of all time, very creative, very tactical. By the age of 22, Alekhine was already among the strongest chess players in the world. And we have plenty of interesting videos available online about him. This is Dr. Max Euwe. Max Euwe was one of 2 world champions that were not professional chess players. In fact, the other world champion, who was not a professional chess player, had the same profession as Dr. Max Euwe. He was a math professor at a university. So, he was born in 1901. He would have been about 4 years older than my grandfather. He was the 5th player to become world chess champion. Actually, he was in and out of the World Chess Championship. He was champion, then not, and then he was champion again. I believe Botvinnik had interfered in the meanwhile. So Euwe played his first tournament at the age of 10, winning every game. Euwe won every Dutch chess championship that he contested from 1921 until 1952, and additionally won the title in 1955. His 12 titles are still a record. The only other winners during this period were Salo Landau in 36, when Euwe, then world champion, did not compete, and Jan Hein Donner in 54. He became the world amateur chess champion in 1928 at The Hague with a score of 12 out of 15. And the rest is stuff about his life that we might not care about quite as much, since I'm sure you guys want to start seeing the games themselves. So the match, this was the last game in the match here that was decisive. If we look at the match score here, actually Alekhine was the last one to win a game in game 27 of what became a 30-game match. So I'm going to show you the last win by Max Euwe, and then the final game, which turned out to be a draw. So, with little further ado, let's take a look. Max Euwe, born 1901, died in 1981, over 80 years old. World champion at the age of 34. So, let's take a look at the games. First, we have this game, which was called the Pearl of Zandvoort. That's in Holland, the Netherlands, where the match was played. And this one was with Max Euwe as the white pieces. He started off with d4, e6, inviting the French defense. c4, f5. This is called the Dutch defense. I think he may have chosen this move order, e6 first, to avoid the Staunton gambit. Today, the Dutch is not as well respected and very rarely used at the highest levels. The move order tends to dissuade the Staunton gambit. A normal move for black here would be to go here. We see a lot of modern grandmasters playing into either the Nimzo Indian, which occurs after knight c3 and bishop to b4, or knight f3, b6, which then becomes the Queen's Indian. Of course, after knight f3, black could play d5, and we could get a Catalan with g3 as well. d5 is also still played here. A lot of top players would prefer to have their c-pawn here instead of their e-pawn. But again, these two moves are most common today. So we have g3, we have the check, he blocks, and he goes back. And that might look like it lost a tempo, but black didn't want the bishop to be able to go here. And he gets this one out, and both sides develop a few pieces in very normal and predictable ways, with the evaluation of the position being what it usually is in the opening. Anywhere between about 0.20 and 0.50 is rather insignificant and pretty normal. Variations within that range might not really indicate any error by either player. Okay, so we have castles and b6. Now, this is the first move that might be a little mistaken. Easy for me to say with my computer sitting here whirring away, seeing hundreds of thousands of moves per second. But because of that, I think I can be confident in calling b6 an error. I'm not sure that even a modern grandmaster should be expected to know that this move isn't one of the best. But as soon as black makes this move, it's almost a full pawn better for white. A full pawn better for white. And before this, it was right within the normal range of about a quarter of a pawn. So we should wonder, well, what does it look like if black played his best move? Well, it seems that knight takes d2 is the best that black has. And I might have expected white to take with a knight, but apparently being able to bring this knight to e5 has some value. d5, okay, e5 is now a hole. No pawn can ever touch it. Black seems to be heading for a stonewall Dutch. Rook comes over here. He takes the pawn and plays knight e5 with tremendous pressure along the long diagonal. Knight d7, which does cut off defensive e6. And then he comes back and just gets his pawn back. White seems to have quite a bit more space and quite a bit more development here, but then he got to move first. c6 prevents any ideas of knight d5. It also blunts this bishop here on g2 so that he might eventually get his pieces out. e3 doesn't really look so necessary, does it? Queen c7. And this knight is maneuvering around. Apparently, he's interested in attacking e6, not because he expects to win a pawn, but because that will give him extra initiative toward an attack on the king's side when the time comes. All right, black seems to be wanting white to do what he already wants to do. And now the queen is guarded, so the black knight on b6 is no longer pinned and jumps into e5, which I think white really wanted to do anyway. Knight d5, he does end up getting that square. It was a trade-off. And then the queen comes back to the second rank. Finally, all the minor pieces of blacks are off the back row. And we're almost at the 18th move. And when we look at this evaluation, it's back in the normal range. When black made this b6 move, it was almost a whole pawn better for white. And then white's very next move set it right back to normal again. So I think if he had played knight takes e4, he would have kept his advantage. Play might continue this way. Okay, but he did this, and so the evaluation goes right back to a very normal range, around 0.3. So he guards e4 again, and white plays knight e5. And then we have this trade. Now you might wonder, well, how come he doesn't take here? Why doesn't white play bishop takes b7? And the answer is knight takes e2 check. And let's see, then the king would have to move. We can just examine that. Let's say he goes here and he goes here with check. So we'll say the king goes here. And he gets another pawn. He's threatening the queen, but it's still not clear he's going to get the rook free. The queen may escape from the knight, putting additional pressure on d7. And this is a little bit better for black. Yeah, he does have an extra minor piece, but it looks like he's going to lose the rook. Why should this be better for black? What if, well, he did have to save his queen on the previous move. So, suppose he goes here. That threatens another piece. So he could take back. And then why not take the rook? And he could take that back. We had to follow this line because I'm sure you probably wondered, well, what's wrong with going for the black rook? And amazingly, this is better for black here. So when we're in this position, if you go for the bishop to try to get the rook as well, he never did lose this piece then. Threatens the queen, and then guards his rook with his queen. So what happens if we make the normal idea there? And strangely, taking the rook isn't even the best move here. Oh, it is. Okay. Apparently it is. Yeah, okay. That's the best that white can do. And then it still comes out better for black. Who has a piece for the extra rook and 2 pawns. Piece and 2 pawns for the rook, but yet with black doing a little bit better. So white actually made this move, and everything's pretty equal instead of being better for black. So I must admit, if I were in this game, I probably would have taken the bishop, and then black would have been a little better. How about you? So this happens, king takes back, and then the queen goes here, unguarding the bishop. If a knight ever got here, it would be a fork. But he is able to go here with a check. White pushes forward and unleashes his bishop. He attacks this knight, but that also weakens c6. He comes back out of the way of his bishop. And black seems to have 2 pawns on the 4th rank. And it looks like he may get his pieces to maybe even attack white. King h1. And black wants white to develop his knight for him. And white refuses. Now he gets his king off this dangerous diagonal so that we don't have ideas of pawn takes and pawn forward with a check from the queen. And now he's prying open the long dark diagonal. And the knight just moves anywhere out of the way, putting even more pressure on c6. So he moves the pawn, and then the knight retreats, keeping an eye on d4 and the blockade square e3. Knight d7. Finally, black gets his piece out. Knight e3 as predicted. Knight f6, opposing white's bishop on the long diagonal. And he takes this pawn and threatens d6. So you might go, well, why did black allow that? I mean, the rook was guarding the pawn before. I think we're going to see, though, in a minute. You're going to see why. He takes, that takes the whole piece and opens a new attack to the knight. So knight takes the pawn with a threat on the queen. Queen moves, and then he takes one more pawn. Bishop acts like it's going to escape, and then he moves his knight again. So now that the smoke is cleared, black has an extra bishop, and white has 2 connected, one connected pass pawn and another potential pass pawn. g5. That looks like a very bold move, opening up his king side that way. But white does not have a dark squared bishop, and he doesn't have other minor pieces close to black's king. And it seems that black's move would even offer white an open file. I think white does not want to trade off a lot of pieces, as he expects his king position to prove better. He's obviously ready to play e5. And then he tucks that in back there. And white's advantage is still less than 2/3 of a pawn. Not real significant after 26 moves. And now he goes here. And as the computer thinks deeper, yeah, the advantage is a little more than half a pawn. You're getting closer to 2/3 of a pawn here. And we could wonder, what should black do? What's his best move? b5, the sacrifice keeps coming up. Queen e8 might be a good move for black to attack and defend at the same time. But after this move, all of a sudden, white's getting a lot closer to being a whole pawn ahead again. Still not real significant. Attacks the pawn. And yeah, if he takes the knight, yeah, if white takes the knight, this knight still guards e4. So let's see. What do you think should happen if white takes this knight. Try to decide before I show. All right, so let's say he takes this knight. Now, this is a target for the queen, because if the queen got to go here, it would be a checkmate. This is also unguarded, and white cannot move this knight and guard this square. So this becomes good. And if white goes here, trying to just guard everything, then he'll go ahead and take the knight and guard his bishop. And he's a full piece ahead. All he's got to worry about are those white pawns down there, but this position is better for black. So that's what happens on e takes d7. We have this and this. The double threat one apiece. So can't do that. So he moves his knight up. He likely wants to bring his knight to here or here and then maybe to here. Black lines up, threatens queen g2 mate. White hits the queen with his rook triple defended by knight, the other rook, and the king. And the bishop takes. He takes back with his rook. His rook is still double defended. Attacks the queen. Queen jumps out of the way. And now knight g5 prevents the rook trade and leaves the threat of pawn takes knight. Rook g7. Black seems to be preparing to double on the file. He's going to take, and doesn't seem extremely urgent for black to take this pawn. Queen goes here, and white has these two passed pawns here and the knight to compensate for a rook. And since they're both passed pawns, it could work. Black might have as his best option to try to make a perpetual check, but either it is or it is not possible. Knight comes in, double defended, the knight guards f4 as well. Puts even more pressure on the pawn, but that does nothing. The black queen still can't take that pawn. He goes here to pin it, and after takes and takes, he goes to here to attack this pawn. So, what can white do to create threats with some of these pieces so he can move the pawn without losing it? Well, first he goes here and just guards it. He has a getaway square in case the rook comes down, and if the rook came down, he would not need it. He would just capture with his rook. But at this point, you can see the advantage for white is just under a half of a pawn. So without examining a whole lot of games, I really am not sure that white is really going to win. From time to time, this evaluation, as you saw a moment ago, goes down to like 0.4, less than a half of a pawn advantage. Certainly, that would not be a big advantage for either side in a game between some school-age kids. He makes this move, and all of a sudden, look how much it changed. It went from about a half pawn better for white to almost, well, about 1 2/3 pawns better for white all of a sudden. And to me, as a human, it looks like these pawns are going to be the answer of why, while our computer continues to churn away at 650,000 positions per second. Okay, the knight goes to his only safe square. And without rooks coordinating on this rank here, white can say to himself, well, how many moves does it take for me to get a queen? Because it's going to be checked the moment he does anyway. E6. All right, comes right behind this pawn. Knight c6 attacking the rook. And we have these four actors all in this one little area for white. So although they only have the same material value as black's two, the two rooks, there's a lot more squares and a lot more things they can do this way. Rook e8, okay, e7, and these moves should happen fairly soon. d6 and d7, he attacks. And he's going to reposition it. This knight now can get to a lot of different squares because he can start with a check. So the king came to make sure he doesn't have that, but now he has a different check if he wants it. If he wanted to get here, okay, so he gets there in one move. He threatens this. King comes up, check, it's guarded by the pawn. And then this forces the rook to die or to give itself up for the pawn and die. So at this point, really, it's resignable for black between players at this level. White's advantage is so big that I'm certain that both players know it. I don't know why black would even bother to make one more move like this. And then white just goes here, check. And he may snatch the rook next. Obviously, he's going to turn this pawn into a queen. And it is all over for black. So white resigned here. So let's see the final game of the match, which was this one. This is the 30th game. So Max Euwe is leading by a half a point. And so in this game, he only needed a draw to win the match. If Alexander Alekhine had gotten a win, he could have won the match here. So start off with d4, d5 and the Queen's Gambit, and it was a Queen's Gambit accepted. Knight f3, a very normal move. I'm not going to go into the highly technical aspects of this because it's not going to be so valuable. Okay, that blocks the queen and the bishop. It's kind of a weird move. So he goes over here to just collect the pawn. c6 doesn't guard the pawn, but it does guard b5. He gets his pawn back, and then he gets a second knight out. But before this, you see how close to equal it was. Okay, black makes this move, and it's still pretty equal. Another game that was played in 1979 actually reached the same position, and in that game this move was played, and that continued like this. Attack on the bishop, goes back, guards f7, another piece comes out, knight comes out, and then white forms this full center. d4 pawn cannot be guarded by a pawn any longer. Okay, he lets his other bishop out. Now white guards d4 with his bishop. He gets another piece out. He gets another piece out. Black trades because he does not want to have his knight over at the edge like he would after white makes a trade. And he doesn't want white to trade his knight for the bishop. Takes back with the queen and challenges that advanced knight. White, who has more development and more space, better control of the center, does not right now want to just trade a bunch of pieces. Castles and castles. Now, this move is often to pin the knight, but the king is not here. So you got to wonder, since this black queen cannot go here because the queen cannot go here because of the bishop, can't go here, 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 or here because of these pawns, and can't go here because of the knight, can't go here because of this knight, can't go here because of this knight, can't go here because of this pawn, and should not go here because of maybe knight e5. So that queen move doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Yet it is the best that black has right now. A3 prevents any bishop from coming here or knight. In situations like this, if you're the guy whose queen is out here, you've got to be careful on every move that your queen doesn't get totally trapped. Now the rook comes out, and white gets another rook out to his only open file. Black hopes to open the e file. Now we attack the queen, and the queen cannot go to a4 because the knight guards it. So he goes backwards. Now white is ready to play moves like maybe b5 himself because the knight is also helping. He could end up trapping this queen. That actually is to get out of the way of the rook more than anything else. And we attack the queen. The queen just sort of sidesteps him. Now white may want to just isolate this pawn and let it be a weakness that he can aim at later. And apparently he does do exactly that. And this position is still very close to equal. Oh, that was our sideline from the knight b6 game that went like this. This was just a sideline, a rather long one. Okay, this is the move actually played. So after queen takes the pawn, black went knight g f6 as his fifth move. And then white prepared the fianchetto and castle kingside. So does black. Knight c3 guards d5 some more. And they both get their bishops out. And they both castle. And then queen a5. Now this queen could shift over to the king side anytime it feels like it, and has cleared the d8 square for a rook. e4 is starting to look like a Grunfeld. Queen to h5. Or what if black goes here in the beginning? I think we may have seen that. Then here, then here. Okay, so returning to our game. Bishop g4, b4, g5. What? Those are some very strange moves. White cannot safely capture that pawn, but if he moves it again to bother the knight, then the knight can go to h4 right here if it comes up. Takes, guarded by the pawn. Knight jumps in, the pawn is pinned to the queen, so white will have to move his his queen again, so he does. And black now brings another defender to the king side. They both have a queen, two rooks, four minor pieces, all four, and they both have only one pawn missing. C pawn for white, the D pawn for black. That should keep the bishop from capturing at h3, but if h6, he must move the knight. So he does that. And now it's like 2 pawns better for white. Although this game ends as a draw. Uh-oh, look at that. So he's got to put the knight in the way so he doesn't lose the queen. Takes with the pawn. Takes with the bishop. And that attacks the queen. And that is a bizarre looking move that I did not even think might happen. Max Server seems to make a lot of weird small sacrifices. King takes, queen c4 check. But how do we know that this is good? It is plus 1 1/4 pawn, so it is good. I just wonder, what is the threshold? What is the weakest player that could be expected to win from this position? E6, isolated pawn, can't move anywhere. Okay, white's rooks are connected. So what all matters now is, can black clobber him or can he get away? Oh, now black might try to clobber, white might try to clobber black now. I suppose he wants to move his rook here, but this will become unguarded if he does it too soon. Okay, so he brings the other rook now. He seems to be ready and anxious to play rook h2. And f3 will only be guarded by the rook if rook h2. So, oh wow. White just wins a pawn here. Look at this cool little, it's simple enough, but it's kind of cool. He takes the pawn check, and after taking the queen, he gets black's queen. But this knight is still hanging. He has to move. He saves the bishop, and the pawn is pinned by the rook, so white can't take it immediately. So he goes here. Now the knight's got to go here if it is to get away at all. And now we're very much winning for white pieces. Let's see how that happened. E6 he's winning. So we're tracking down where the real mistake happened. H6 is it. It really is amazing that this very innocuous looking move is the seed of black's destruction. I can't say, without looking at the computer's analysis, that that move was a bad move. I mean, I would be surprised that it is. Of course, players at a world championship level might be expected to see more. Yep, so f3 hitting the queen, and then this. King takes, queen c4 check. White plays in a very enterprising and dynamic way. Attacking queen, queen moves, gets his bishop out. Okay, yeah, this is where he wins a pawn check. So he saves the bishop, goes here, he saves the knight. He moves this one here, saving his pawn from the bishop. Okay, c8, f4. White has a dangerous center. The knight retreats, puts new pressure on g3 from the rook, but that's okay. It's double defended for now. That unleashes this bishop and creates a new threat. So black goes here. He wants to trade some more. So, okay. And then this move, which allows the knight to go to one of these squares at some point, if it wishes to, goes here. Okay, that means that white likely can move here. Okay, other side. He's attacking the rook. Check is not a problem. Attacks the rook. Rook saves himself. White double defends the pawn. And they agree to a draw here. Looks a little stronger for white, but since the draw was all that was required for Alekhine to take the draw, is as good as resigning the match. And that's how the World Championship changed to Max Euwe, December 15th, 1935. I hope you enjoyed those games and the background on the history and the players at the time. And I hope you will subscribe, like this video, and please share it and tell your friends about it. Thanks for watching.